lounging, son.
All right, welcome back to the Comic Lounge. My name is Ryan, and with me today, I got my boy Rocko Jerome, and we're going to be doing something a little special today. We're going to be going through the Ghost Agents Treasury book. We're going to talk a little bit about the book before we kind of like flip through it. That's why you see the multiple cameras, but I'm excited to go through this with you. I think this is, I think it's a dope idea. You know, I'm sure you kind of into it too, or else you would have said yes.
Oh no, I think it's great. Well, and I mean, there's so many getting to do this. We're going deep in on this, of course, and it's the thing that I think about with this sort of stuff, and we encountered this with image grand design too, is like how many little details I don't want to forget about how the book was made, and little things here and there of what work came in when, and what the decision making was that I don't want to lose to my faulty memory. So selfishly, I like to do this sort of thing just for my own, memory, and for my own ability to go back and refer to in times it comes. Because I'm so proud of this thing. I love it. I mean, I just, it's always like a foot away from my hand anytime I'm in the house here, and been enjoying going around town and selling them to people, and it's just been a real blast. So it's very exciting to get into it like this.
Yeah, no, I mean, I love what you've been doing with the promotional stuff. You sent me a couple things that you haven't kind of showed everybody else yet, so I'm kind of cool. I'm stoked to like see the way those came out, those promo photos that you did.
Oh, sure,
yeah. But I am super stoked to go through this with you. This is something I guess the kayfabe channel is kind of like what kind of inspired me to do it. Watching them go through books with the creators, I'm like, why the fuck haven't I thought to do that yet? Why wasn't that my thought? I had the thought of spotlighting indie creators like you and all the people in the ringside seats and showing, either interviewing them. I haven't done enough of going through their books. That's a glaring mistake on my part. I want to do this more. I know that you were probably the first person I reach out to in terms of doing this. I know I'm going to probably do something with Monty Keene.
Oh wow, yeah.
So dude. Like I want to show their work off, because I'm not seeing anybody else showing their work off the way I think it should be. So I'm gonna fill that fucking void, and we're doing it now. And I'm very stoked to fucking go through this book. This is not just a book. This is a fucking object. Magnificent fucking proportions. I think it's such a beautiful item. I think what you guys did, you and Eli, figuring this shit out on how to get it printed, because I know newsprint is not an easy thing. And
newsprint that size is difficult as well.
Yeah, so I mean, I know you even weren't sure, like, is this going to work or not when we talked last time, but it did, and it worked out magnificently. So what we're going to do, like I said, we're going to go through the book. So I'm going to spotlight the camera on this. You're only going to hear Rocko and me talking, and then at times, we're going to also, Rocko's going to throw up some of the original issues, which I couldn't find in time, so we can kind of compare the differences. Yeah, so let's do this.
Looking at it from this angle reminds me of when we would see the videos from China, from the printer in China, because we couldn't get it. You could get a proof, but it was going to cost like $200 to get a proof sent to us. So what we would do, or what they would do rather, is take a video just like you're doing overhead of the pages. The main concern was always, how was the ink going to react on that kind of paper, right? Was it going to blotch out? Was it going to turn into a inky mess? Right. So we would get these videos from the printer. We went through Alibaba.com. I forget the name of the exact printer, but they're all very similar to each other. But this was the way that I initially got to see Ghost Agents Apocalyptico. Was just like you're doing right now. The guy would flip through it, and I would obsess over every little detail to make sure that we were getting what we thought we were getting out of it.
Yeah, it's this. I mean, you can't smell it. I wish there was like smell-o-vision, dude.
Smell-o-vision, right?
Smell the newsprint. But when Eli brought me this book, the first thing I did was I opened it and I smelled the newsprint, because like that. Yeah. I mean, that's just what I do with books.
Of course.
I can't help
it. I mean, it's newsprint. I think is equivalent to like vinyl to us, like what vinyl is to record geeks. Newsprint is to comic people. So if you wouldn't mind just flipping back to the inside front. Yeah. And the cover, of course, is Barry Tan. Funny thing about that was that there was a Barry Tan image that I liked that I was going to use for the cover that we kind of just had that was extra. And as soon as I told him that we were going to do that, he was like, no, I need to make a new cover. If it's going to be a cover, I need to make a cover. And I was like, it's one of those things where it's like, when somebody tells you that they'll do you an awesome favor, but you're also kind of like, damn, I didn't mean for you to go to that much trouble. And I
Yeah.
would have been fine. Like, it's sort of the equivalent of like if somebody was like, let me make you dinner. And I'm like, yeah, no, I'm just going to make a sandwich out of the fridge. No, 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 no. You're a guest in my house. I'm going to make you dinner. Like that was kind of like what Barry did. And then he proceeded to make, the best meal I ever had in my life because this cover is dynamite. I
Oh, it's
mean,
phenomenal.
grabs you out of nowhere. Maybe my favorite Barry Tan piece, which is really saying something. So very fond of this cover. Of course, the woman on there is Donna Prentice. The characters in the background are Oleg and Cross, who are two sort of similarly loaded to the Men from Uncle guys. You got the Apocalyptico troopers on the right, which is sort of like, Smersh, Cobra, Hydra, any number of those. On the upper left, that's Adelaide von Volker, who is sort of the heavy of the piece. So we get the images that are evocative of Apocalyptico, which is of course the opposite number of ghost agents.
Right. And then you can't forget that beautiful logo by Sam J. Royale.
Thanks for
Yeah.
reminding me. Yeah.
Yeah, you can't ignore that, dude. Like that
Yeah.
dude is like something else. Like what he could do with a box of Crayola crayons from fucking the 99-cent store is like I'm not saying he did the logo with that, but I'm just saying
He
like
didn't, but he can
that's
do
how
amazing
talented
things
he
with it.
is.
Yeah, and like melting wax and stuff that he uses in his art. But like, he's a logo guy. And I mean, like, another one where it's like he just knocked it out of the park. I mean, just like the assemblage of talent on this. If I deserve credit for anything, it's that I got these guys together on something that came out in a reasonable amount of time, and got them paid a little bit of money. Like that's like my greatest pride in life is that we managed to pull that off. But yeah, I mean, just everything about this, it's just banging on all cylinders. Yeah. So this inside front is Chris Faison did the art for this. It establishes the premise very quickly. My memory of how I found Chris was that I think he did some sort of a comic that he posted on CKRS, and it was like photorealistic like this. It may have had Kennedy, I don't recall. And I was like, that's what I need. I need somebody that can draw Kennedy and it looks like Kennedy, and Howard Hughes and it looks like Howard Hughes. And I liked his art anyway. And Faison works in TV and movies and stuff as well. Like I think he also works in animation. So he's a pretty legit dude, and I was glad that I could get him to knock this out. There's a little Easter egg on the second to the last panel where that is the sort of the death card for the faked death of Maxwell Almond, who of course is the original comic ghost agent that you saw in Craig CK's book that I did with him.
I didn't even notice that.
Yeah.
Yep. I didn't even pay attention to that. That's crazy.
Yeah, that's why it's cool to do these types of things.
Yeah.
And funny thing about that was that when it said deceased Max Almond, Craig saw that and he was like, "What the fuck is this?" And I was like, "He didn't die off panel. That's not what we did." The conceit of ghost agents is that these agents, these different characters, had their deaths faked so they could be off the grid. Hence, ghost. They're ghosts, as in ghost agents. So yeah, that's a little hint that all of this exists in the same world.
And we kick off with this awesome story drawn by the fucking amazing Chris Anderson, which I really fucking dig.
And Chris is like the big man on campus. He's in heavy metal, of course. Chris is a guy who is accomplishing things, and he's hustling, and he's great. He's always been, since the beginning of Image Grand Design, has always kind of been a really excellent leader, honestly. I mean, it's always sort of his ideas that I listen to maybe the most closely of everybody that I worked to. It was actually his idea to do Ghost Agents as a Kickstarter in the first place. When Eli and I were first talking about it, he was like, why not do a Kickstarter? And it's like, it sounds scary. If you don't make the money, you don't get it. And he's like, yeah, but you can also sell posters and buttons and stickers and all sorts of stuff and give people an imperative to want to back your thing because there's a time limit. And he was absolutely correct about that. So Chris is an absolute leader. And this was actually the first Ghost Agent story that was finished. Craig had a script, the long Max Almond script, but he tattoos people, for 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. So he was a bit busy. And it occurred to me that we could sort of like take some of the characters that are going to appear in Ghost Agent and spin it off into Ghost Agents, so that way I'm doing something. And it was Chris that it all started with. Chris was sort of the initial like one-off, like, how many pages can you commit to right now? 6. I can do a 6-page story. And he made this. And the original intention was that it was going to be in Wizard 2. And then Wizard 2 took a while to get done. So it was like, okay, well, let's do something else. Let's make this its own book. And so we did.
And you can't see this because it's doing some weird effect with the camera. But there's a fucking tone on here that is kind of like looking like almost like a rainbow effect for some reason on the camera. But yeah, this is a great story. And I remember you telling me that it was that Ghost Agents was going to debut in Wizard. That would have come out first, but obviously that was a fucking massive tomb of so much different stuff, and like Eli was doing he was doing most of that work by himself. He's juggling a lot of plates at that time. So I remember when he was like, I'd see him at the shop and he's like, yeah, I'm still working on it, like
made it a huge book. Yeah, and I mean, it's the kind of thing where it's like a lot of what Ghost Agents is, and I've spoken to this a little bit in the past, but it bears repeating, is that the things that I worked on with Image Grand Design that I didn't like, I eliminated from Ghost Agents. Like, generally with Ghost Agents, there's not a story that I'm waiting on to put it out. Like, it's like when it's ready to come out, it comes out. And if there's somebody who hasn't finished their story for whatever life reason or work reason, they'll be in the next one. That's the way that I look at it. So,
well, that's what's good about this book, is that it's not linear, and it is a Ghost Agents anthology book, technically, right? Like, that is what it is. So it's Ghost Agent stories that span like multiple different things. I mean, there's one in space that we're going to get to that was like one of my favorite ones. So that is pretty cool that you've done that you've made it so that it is technically an ongoing, but it's an ongoing anthology. So you do have a ton of fucking artists. You've even told me like some people that you're working with that haven't debuted yet. This is easily one of the best indie books that to come out of the group. Got, like Rick Lopez with his Power book, John Burkett. I'm like, Feral Star is dope. I'm like, when are you gonna have more? Like, I want that stuff. Relic Hunter by Adam Lemna, who's also in this book. Like, a lot of these people whose books I already like are also a part of this, which is really cool.
Yeah, I think of this as being like the all-star band, like the whole concept behind this is to get those guys paid and also get their work seen by a few more people. And I shamelessly promote it. I mean, it's just, when it comes to this, I don't care. Like, I'll here in Louisville, I've been going into like art museums, the gift shops, and being like, you should stock this. It's a work of art. People will buy this if it's here. Like, like that's the whole idea, is that it's just everybody that's involved is dope, and they do great work, and I want them in. That's all there is to it.
I also have to mention, dude, before we go into the next story too, is Chris Anderson's like the lettering on his onomatopoeias that he has here are fucking next level, dude.
Right. Well, and he knows how much I love pop art and how my definition of pop art encompasses all of comics, and like, I don't want it to seem pretentious. But I definitely wanted to tap into that, that sort of like almost unconscious thing that we have in our heads. And I never want this book to feel like a total retro throwback. Like, this doesn't look like a 60s comic, but it feels evocative. So very happy about it.
I love this.
Yeah, Craig C.K. And of course, this is the appearance of Max Ullman, even though we don't name him as such. One of the things that I was really cognizant of as we were putting together this book was that I wanted the bits and pieces to sort of appear to the reader as they read it, so that they don't get lost if they do read it in order, right? So like in the Chris Anderson bit here, we established that Apocalyptico are the bad guys, that Dawn is the good guy, she's one of the ghost agents. And then in this Craig CK page rather, we establish what that watch is, which is very similar looking to the watch that I tend to wear. That emits the shock that lets ghost agents know that they have something they have to do, right? So, I wanted this thing to be as simple as possible because I wanted to sort of find an audience outside of just comic book fans. So I wanted to sort of, in a way, almost like spoon feed these important plot devices as someone reads the book. So that way it's like, okay, got it, the watch, because the watch comes up later, of course.
This is also one of my favorite Ghost Agents pieces of art.
Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
this it's so simple,
It
but
is.
it's so powerful at the same
Yeah.
time.
I have that poster right over there. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's always something I see in my day-to-day life. So yeah, he did an excellent job with that. And of course, here's Barry Tan. This is interesting, and this is
Yeah.
something I like to go back to and talk about a lot. This began life as part of Darkest Image. Darkest Image, of course, if well, I say of course, like everybody knows, but it was sort of the book that came after Image Grand Design. When Image Grand Design was finished, there were a lot of people who didn't know that we were really doing it, who were good artists, who were like, oh, I wish I'd known, I would have been involved. And Image Grand Disaster, the sort of the flip side of Image Grand Design, was originally sort of intended to be just a free-for-all anthology, and that's not how it turned out to be. So I wanted other people to feel like they had the imperative to make those types of fan comics for themselves. So I sort of said, well, do Darkest Image, just do that. You guys should do that. And they did. It was as simple as that. Barry Tan, I saw a page that he did of the Planet from 1963.
Oh, right.
The sort of the Mr. I think Mr. Incorporated, I think is the Fantastic Four knockoff, and it was kind of like the Thing, and it was that this monster thing where he's like standing in the rain with a trench coat, and it's instead of Ben Grimm, it's this dude with a moon for a head. And I saw that, and I immediately was like, Darwin Cook, Bruce Timm, that's my shit. This is the guy that I need to be working with today. Like, get him, you know. So I reached out to him and I was like, you like 1963? Why don't we do a 1963 story for Darkest Image, right? And the conceit of that, as we got to talking, let's do a story that takes place a few years later, right? Because 1963 and 1968 are very different years culturally, of course. So took Sky Solo, who was like sort of their female Nick Fury, and Johnny Beyond, who was like their Doctor Strange, and that version was like sort of a beatnik. So by 1968, I'd imagine that he's a hippie, and then Sky Solo probably would go from just being like a 1963 person to being sort of a disgruntled, almost like an Archie Bunker figure after all the radical stuff that happens leading up to 1968. So we did the story with those two characters, and that was what this originally was. And then, you know, we fell in that same trap that you get with bootleg fan comics, which is that you can't make any money off of it, and you can't really do a lot with it. You're always kind of like in that black market with it. So it occurred to me, like, we could just change some little details around, change the names of the characters, and
I
it
love it.
becomes, yeah, case in point.
I love that. It's so simple.
Right.
So simple. A little bit of the dialogue, I think you had to switch around too, right?
Yeah, we
But
did.
not
We
much.
did. And I actually have this handy because I'm one of the few people that got the original one of
Oh, yeah.
these.
For
I
everybody that can't see, Rocco was holding up the comic cavalcade by Barry Tan, which you can
right.
get from Cosmic Line.
There we go. This was where it all began. This was the image I was referring to just now, and I saw this, and I was like, I need to make friends with him. And then that led to this, right? So this was the original, right? It was the lady from Laser. You see that symbol on her chest there, and that this was Johnny Beyond over here, you know. So you want to do other people's characters, what people have been doing since time immemorial. I mean, like Star Wars, not to compare myself to Star Wars because that's ridiculous, but like he wanted to get the rights to Flash Gordon and they wouldn't let him do it. So it was like, okay, I'll make something else up. And he did.
Yeah.
That
Yeah, we've
turned
also
out better
talked
for him.
about that. We've also talked about, like, there's a way to kind of do the characters you want, but you just got to change a little bit, you know? And it's like, you can change enough to where it doesn't feel like a carbon copy, but you can definitely tell what it's homaging, you know? And I think that if you toe that line, you're getting something cool that doesn't feel like, oh, they're just doing a Star Wars fucking comic, you know? Or they're just doing, like you said, just doing a Flash Gordon fucking movie.
So, I mean, you know, Watchmen,
right?
It's like that. Cobra, obviously something I like.
Cobra, yeah.
So as you get into these pages, as
the color, I have to say, I'm sorry to interrupt. The coloring looks so good in this book.
Right.
We're going to see it throughout, but it's probably the best coloring I've ever seen on a newsprint comic.
Yeah, I mean, it's so good. And This was the version that came out in the first issue of Ghost Agents, covered by Sam J. Royale. There was only a few hundred of these. If you have one of these, congratulations.
Yeah.
But you see, in this version, we didn't do that, and we did this sort of wonky, sort of a weird effect where we made it so it almost looks like 3D or something, sort of an op art kind of an attack that we did with this thing that some people found confusing. If you look at this with 3D glasses, interesting things will happen. As we get into these next pages of the Treasury, you can contrast and compare how we change some things around just for the sake of variety.
Yeah, I mean, I like both, but I think the fucking colors pop insanely off of this. Like the contrast of like just like the blue tones, which kind of reminds me of like the Parker books, and kind of that new book that Michael Evanoming Blue Book that he's drawing is very similar too. And I love that. And then so to add this in there, it gives you a completely different experience than what you got with the single issue of #1, which I still love. But it's cool that you changed up stuff also in this, so that you are getting not just a new reading experience in terms of like the size or the paper, but you changed up a couple things, which I really dig too.
Yeah, thank you. That was very important to me that we do that we make it so that there's add variance, which adds value, so that way, you know, it's not like you're buying the exact same thing again. And the people who have those original books won't feel like they're gypped because they bought that before they could get the Treasury. Like, you have something special if you have those original 3 issues.
Right.
Yeah, look at this. Like, by comparison to what I just showed you, like, this is really something else.
It's completely different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're in a different place with this now. Yeah. So, and, you know, I told them it's like, you know, blacklight posters, you know, that's sort of the thing. Like, the thing that I'm sort of the biggest influence that I have on the actual work itself is definitely in colors, right? Because I write scripts. How I do it is I see an artist whose work I like, I hit them up. I say, do you want to get paid for your work? Turns out that's a pretty good way to start a conversation. If they say yes, then it's like, how much can I get out of you? Can I get a poster, a pinup, a story up to 10 pages? And then I write a script under the influence of some sort of a substance. And then I get the art back from them. And then the coloring is sort of when I start to sort of go to work a little bit. You know, that's sort of where I have the most influence, which is like, you know, can we make this? What can we do to make this not look like a conventional comic? That's always my thing. I don't want it to look remotely like just some, you know, like Justice League issue number 32, just whatever. You know, I want it to always feel like an object.
Yeah. No, and it just, every time I see Barry Tan work, whether it was his comic Cavalcade or in here, it just makes me mad that there's not more Barry Tan comics in the world, you know, because he's so fucking talented, you know, and like he really is. Like, if you look at that comic Cavalcade, if you pick it up or you get a chance to, or you follow him on social media, he kind of is like a chameleon too, in the same sense like Jim Rugg, like where he can mimic styles. Like, and he does it in that book where he does the ABCs of Image, and he recreates the Youngblood cover. Right. And it even kind of looks like Liefeld a little bit, you know, but it also has that Barry Tan feel. And
yes, it always still looks like him. Like, even though you can tell that he's into Toth and Darwin Cook and Tim, it's like he doesn't look like he's aping those guys.
No,
it doesn't look like he's trying to do a copy. It's like, this is definitely his own thing. Yeah. Very fortunate to have come across Barry Tan.
Yeah. No, he's a fucking revelation.
This story also, the sort of one of the conceits of it too is that it's like the Strange Tales, you know, Nick Fury and Doctor Strange. It was, you know, the double feature. And this was kind of a way to have those two characters spiritually sort of interact, right? So it's like, you know, Steranko meets Ditko in this too is kind of what we were going for, so that it sort of threads that needle. And then this was the story that we actually started the first issue with. This, of course, is Ben Perkins. This is an interesting case in which, you know, this was a very important one because it was one of the first stories with Donna Prentice, who is sort of the main character of the book in a lot of ways. And it's kind of like the Wolverine of the book, or how I'm kind of trying to make it, so that she's like, to me, she's sort of the most intriguing character. So I want her to kind of break out and be interesting to people. A big thing about it is, you know, especially as a dude who's doing a book that has a woman as a prominent character, there's obviously various pitfalls that you don't want to fall into. You don't want it to be like a TNA, or I don't want it to be like a TNA kind of a thing. I want her to seem like a full-fledged character and not some sort of a fantasy or something. And one of the things that's really great about Ben is that he tends to draw people who are they look like real people. They look like they're like flawed human beings, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And that was very important here, because with this other character, Cinnamon, like, you know, I pictured like Pam Grier, you know, and then
Yeah.
what he delivered was very different from that. And I was happy that he did so, because it was like, I don't ever want this to be a kind of a book that like any woman would look at and be like, gross, like, this is how you see us. Like, you know, I didn't want that to ever be the vibe. So this sort of early on, of course, the other story that Chris did that we saw first was the very first one with Don, and he did a great job with it. But this one is a little bit more of an in-depth story, right? So I wanted to make sure that this, you know, hit a certain way, and he did a great job here. And also on these 2 pages, this is something I don't think I've ever said publicly anywhere. But Donna is a lesbian, and this is the first and only time so far that that's even sort of been hinted at, that she had a relationship with this woman. So I didn't want it to be like, you know, the two of them like making out, or like, you know, go into some sort of a salacious thing, but just like the little hint here of when they're wrestling to the ground and Cinnamon says, "Oh, you're getting me nostalgic." That is intended to tell the reader, this is a comic that features a lesbian. Like, it's like, you know, I didn't want it to be like a pushy thing or any sort of a in any way sort of a gimmick or something.
Mm-hmm.
And I was very happy to see that this comic, in my favorite local comic shop, one of the people there read it and put it in the LGBTQ section of the
Oh,
new book.
dope.
So I thought that was cool. I felt like I had done a good enough job of representing that it wasn't in your face or gimmicky, but that if you read closely, you can tell what's going on there.
Yeah, I really love his page composition too. I love the choreography at the top. And I think you mentioned it when we discussed, because I know we talked after Ghost Agents 1 or during the Kickstarter. I'm not sure, but I know we talked about it. And you mentioned how like this was Ben's idea to do the over the
That was
two
Ben's
page.
idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was interesting because the way that he came to me was like, I hope you don't mind if I did, which is, you know, to his credit that he would do that. And I was just like, anything that makes this more unique, I want you to do that.
Yeah.
Like, that's the whole idea. Like, make it as unusual and as sort of confrontational in a stylistic way as possible. That's what I want. So yeah, he did great, and I'm very happy about that. And then this was another one where there was some sort of the coloring was sort of my idea, because at the top we have the flashback here,
Right.
where we see Donna had previously gone to meet with Ben Venice, who is the guy who runs Ghost. Ben Venice started years ago in a series of prose books that I was going to do. I only managed to get through 2, in which Ben Venice was sort of the original like Nick Fury type guy, like the original like J. Edgar Hoover or whatever you might say of Ghost. So then this is where he first appears in the book. And the top there was supposed to feel very cool. So it's, of course, blue and white. And then the bottom flashback is just supposed to show you sort of the foreshadowing of the crazy shit that's coming. So it's in black and red. And that was one of my direct contributions. I asked him to do that. And then the stuff that takes place in the present sense of the story is in the middle there. Yeah, I'm very happy.
This
It's wild.
This is
It gets
insanity
really
right
wild. Yeah. And that was one where like I kept pressing Ben on this because I wanted it to be freaking weird. And like the type of stuff that I would say is like, when somebody looks at this, I want them to feel nauseous. I want it to feel freaky in a way that's disturbing. I want it to sort of like get into someone's head without it being too gory or whatever. I want it to feel nauseating because these people are doing this shit to themselves and making themselves into something inhuman, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think he got it.
No, he nailed it for sure.
There was a funny thing about this. There's a movie called Charlie. It's a movie that's based on Flowers for Algernon. If you remember that short story from middle school or high school.
Yeah, I remember that.
Where the guy, it's basically like the movie Lawnmower Man also stole the plot, where there's a guy, you know, with some sort of mental disabilities, and they give him drugs that make him super smart. And there's a random psychedelic scene in that movie for no reason, because it was made in like 1969 and you just did that. But like all of a sudden, like Charlie is a motorcycle gang leader, and he's out on a motorcycle, and it's like this whole like weird trippy scene that I saw in this movie in like the 8th grade. They showed it to us, and it always stayed with me. And I remember I showed Ben that. I found that scene, and I was like, imagine this in the middle of like a movie that's a drama that's not about this. Like this is sort of what I want. I want it to feel like just all of a sudden just very abruptly strange. And he did a great job with it.
Yeah, he nailed it.
Yeah. So these pages are different from the original issue. There was a bit of a, I don't know if disconnect is the word, but I felt like maybe we didn't quite get across what we needed to in the original version, right? Because
Okay.
what I needed to have happen was for the reader to be able to tell that Donna goes into a weird zone and she kills all those monsters after they've killed her friend Cinnamon. And then on the last page, you see that everybody's dead but her. And people ask me, like, what was supposed to have happened there? Which is sort of like the equivalent of like when you think you have a great joke and then you tell it and people are like, what happened to the farmer's daughter? What now? Because it was like, oh shit, we didn't stick the landing. So I paid Ben a little bit more money to expand upon that. And I asked him to just do one extra page. And to his credit, he instead just sort of like deconstructed the previous pages and added this content where you can see that Cinnamon is unfortunately killed by these creatures, and then she goes off and kills the creatures, so that way it's perfectly clear what happens there.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, I didn't. It's been so long since I read #1 that I forgot that it was different until you just showed me those pages.
Most people do, I think. It's sort of an extended scene, and it's like the sort of thing that's actually sort of a compliment to the thing. I wanted this whole story to, what is it, the Bechdel test? The thing, what is that? Do you know what I'm talking about? Like that sort of that storytelling trope where it's like, rarely do you have two women have a conversation that's not about a man. You know what I'm talking about? Oh, okay. Well, people are probably going to take me to task for not remembering the name correctly. But there was a woman who was a storyteller, and she observed that usually in any sort of story, when two women are talking, it's about a man. Like it's like it's very rare that you have like women treated like characters of their own, that they can exist on their own and in their own place. And I wanted this to work like that. One of the things that I do sort of regret in retrospect, and I wish this had occurred to me more at the time, was that the only Black character that we've introduced is killed in the first story, which is kind of one of those annoying, like horror movie, whatever sorts of deals.
It's always the Black person that dies first.
Yeah, and I didn't mean to do that, and I feel bad about that. But
I'm sure you'll find a way to rectify that.
Yeah, of course. That's in the works, of course. Well, it's kind of one of those things too, because these characters are all supposed to be like, ex-CIA, FBI, MI5, and obviously there were and are Black agents, but it was at that time in the middle of the 20th century, it was rare. So it's kind of like, I want to make sure I treat that kind of character correctly. Like, what would have been their motivation to join the CIA in the first place, to then eventually end up being in Ghost. And I feel like there's a big story there to tell, and I need to make sure that I do it right.
What's this page?
Yeah, that's Jason Von Grimm Forrester.
Okay.
And that's intended to sort of, if you're reading this book in order for the first time, it's like, what the hell is this? That it is, of course, intended to be sort of a little bit of a hint and foreshadowing of some serious shit.
Yeah.
That's coming.
This is here another one of my favorites.
Yeah, Adam Lemna. So this is the character who we saw earlier on as sort of a background character in that Barry Tan story. And he's the sort of the lovesick guy who he loves Agent May Zero, and she doesn't want anything to do with him. So she has spurned him for the last time. So in order to try to impress him, he's going to go into the netherworld. He's going to let them rip a hole into the netherworld, and he's going to jump in, because he's a good soldier, and this is the kind of thing that he likes to do. I like that. I don't know if this was intentional or not, but the character, like the size of his head and sort of the dimensions of his head and eyes, reminds me of like Thunderbirds. you know, like
Yeah,
Harry
yeah, it
Anderson.
does. Yeah, yeah, it does.
Yeah, that's what this looks like to me. I don't know if that was in his head or if that was intentional, but it came out that way. I think it's cool.
And he did all this lettering by hand, huh?
He did. Yeah.
Fucking crazy,
Yeah, he
dude.
went all in. I actually have this was one of the few instances where I actually drew an example of what I kind of wanted it to look like. Yeah, look at this. This is interesting.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I kind of gave him a little bit of direction here. And then this.
Weird shit is here. I like
Yeah.
that.
Isn't that fun?
Yeah.
So I could have like a ghost agent's corner over here of my condo where like the inspirations and ephemera from ghost agents sort of. There's an original Barry Tan, and there's the poster of
Oh, nice.
the two-page spread here. So yeah, I mean, this is the and weird shit that really is by directive with these artists a lot of the time. It's like just a lot of it will be these really in-depth things of like Donna Prentice is 6'6", she's Greek, draw her with a Greek nose, don't make her look like a white woman, like she's like this, don't make her boobs too big, she always wears white and black, she's very stylish, whatever she's wearing should be cool, like very exact. And then it's like, and then she's fighting a monster. What kind of monster? That's up to you, bro. Like I really like to just let artists go crazy with the stuff that they can go crazy with, because this book is ultimately for me first. Like I'm the first audience for this. Like I basically want to make the book that I want to see. And
Yeah, I mean that's what they always say, dude. They always say write the book you want to see or that you want
yeah,
to read, you know?
yeah, and that's what this is. That's for sure.
This page is insane. It's just
Yeah, he
insane.
went all in on this, and it's interesting because this netherworld concept is like, I literally just tell artists to draw crazy shit. It's sort of the one. Like it's the whole book sort of exists in like sort of a James Bond, like maybe like a 60s James Bond level of unreality,
Mm-hmm.
except for this netherworld thing. And I sort of took that idea from like the way that Jim Shooter often likes to do things, like with Valiant or Watchmen is like that too, where it's like it's a certain level of believability, but then you have this one element of like a Dr. Manhattan, right? So
Yeah.
the netherworld and our ability to rip into it via atomic explosions is like the one thing that's super science fiction-y. There's no Bigfoot in these. This is the lone unrealistic, truly deeply unrealistic thing. And here's maybe my favorite story. I
This
love this so
this
much.
this fucking page, dude, is
Yeah.
so good.
And I have the poster of that. That's one of the posters that I have in my home. The original version of this looks very different. Yeah, this was more like a conventional. Well, conventional isn't, but like, this was what this originally looked like. And the big idea with this for me, the version that we see printed here, is that I got really fascinated with the old Foom book, the Friends of Old Marvel,
Mm-hmm.
Marvel self fanzine, which everything was like two colors. So I wanted to try to limit it to two colors for these pages, just because I was really into that, and I still am into it. But I wanted to see what this story particularly looked like. A lot of these things sort of have that element of like, we're going to Oz with it. You know what I mean? Like it's like we're going to start off with just like a limited palette, and then it gets weird. This page, of course, with her laying on the floor listening to records, is like one of my favorite things. This shows you, this is sort of the first image that I show people when I talk about ghost agents generally, is it's just like, look, this isn't Spider-Man, this isn't whatever you might think this is, you might have the wrong impression. The records that she's surrounded by here, it's half and half, ones that I chose and ones that Ben chose, going from counterclockwise, starting in the left corner. That's David Ruffin. That's actually a record that never came out until much later. It was supposed to come out in the 60s. In our world it did. David Ruffin was the main voice of the Temptations early on. He did Ain't Too Proud to Beg, and My Girl was David Ruffin, one of my favorite vocalists of all time. So de facto, so is it's also Donna's. Nina Simone, Put a Spell on You, classic record. She's of course
Yes.
holding Bitches Brew, Miles Davis, which is, if you're going to drop acid and put that on, you're in for a bumpy ride. you know and then the
Yeah.
Sonics Boom was the other choice that was mine, and that's a classic garage rock thing that she almost certainly would not have had because there were very few copies of that printed, but I wanted it to be in there. And then is that a James Brown record, or is that Sly and the Family
So
Stone?
that's Sly and the Family Stone,
Yeah,
and
there's
then
Sly up there, and then the one that's sort of like to her immediate right. And I feel bad for not knowing. Oh, it's Dance to the Music. It is Sly Stone. So, oh yeah, yeah. I'm mixed up. I feel embarrassed now. That's Sly Stone. Up there is Jimi Hendrix, and then that Rolling Stones one was actually an EP. That was never an album, but he took a little bit of license with that, just as we did with the David Ruffin record. But cool, nice wide spread of music there, and a lot of different things that she would be into. And I'm really into roughly half those records, as you can tell.
I mean, and before I flip the page, I just got to say, like, I like the original, but I like this version a lot more.
Me
Like the
too.
minimal colors, it just makes this pop off the page, unlike it did in the original. And it's, I mean,
Great.
Ben Perkins
Agreed.
is another artist. Like I know I was like talking about Barry Tan. Every single one of these artists are amazing. Like they each are phenomenal known right. Ben Perkins is like just another one. Like I just don't understand why he hasn't gotten his books done. Like when he's
Yeah,
finished. I know he shopped them around and stuff, but another Uber talent, that you
yeah.
brought into this book.
Well, and so much of it is just getting your work seen,
Right.
by the right people and having somebody give you a shout out, like having Gail Simone challenge the industry that they haven't given you work yet. Like there's an element of luck there, and you have to fight the algorithm that's like this demon wind that's always trying to keep us from doing our stuff. But I mean, it's that kind of thing. And that's what I hope to do with Ghost Ages is get people's work seen a little bit more and help them kind of level up that way.
Agreed.
So in the story here, Donna has dropped acid. I wanted to make sure that we had a casual drug use in this, which is something you don't often see. I know that like in Trash Man, you had that. He would smoke weed and stuff, but like, you never even see like Spider-Man and Mary Jane like at a party having champagne. It's always like, verboten to do that. So that's something that I want to see in more comics that are action adventure oriented comics. So she drops acid. She thinks she's just going to have an evening to herself listening to her records. And then it turns out that Apocalyptico guys are coming to kill her. And we start to, have this rich saturation of these colors. So we're still
Yeah.
using the same two colors, but now it's much more intense because she's tripping and hallucinating as she's fighting these guys.
Yeah, this is another dope story. I mean,
Right.
and then it
And
just
then we
gets
go
crazier.
crazy with the color,
Yeah.
right? Like this
Yeah.
is like that point at which the shit really kicks in and goes into another level of trippiness. So she's all in at this point, and what she sees is not reality.
Yeah, I love that she's using a sword too.
Yeah, that's what she has handy, so she's
Yeah.
going for it,
Yeah.
So, what does this really look like in actual life? And you only sort of see that in the next page. There we go. Her friend Malone, who she called, who I think it's pretty clear that he's like a Black Panther dude
Right.
in the neighborhood there. That's a friend of Donna's. And he comes over to find that she's killed all these people and it's only been 5 minutes. Yeah. And now that was a really, I might butcher his name, but Guy Pillart, the guy who did Pravda. This was sort of a directly inspired by Pravda. It doesn't quite look exactly like Pravda, but that idea of like the motorcycle being a monster with the big badass woman riding it like it's an animal was definitely inspired by Pravda. This is one of the pages that we kind of toyed with the idea of doing this more like the old school Treasury dimensions, which is a little bit wider than this.
Yeah.
But it would have, befucked some of the art. And this was one of the pages that definitely would have suffered for it. And this is one of the main pages that made us want to go with the dimensions that we went with, which is more
Yeah.
like Marvel Treasury size.
Yeah, no, I like this. I mean, this is what like Marvel's doing now with like like when they do like the grand designs. Like this is
Yeah,
close
as
to
well
what
as that. And
stuff.
I always have to mention this is that Marvel anthology book that Alex Ross did.
Oh yeah, you talked about that. I have the singles for that. I don't have the treasury of that, but
Yeah, I would recommend that you get that. That's pretty fucking dope. They hit a lot different, but it's basically like a big comic. It's like a conventional comic, only bigger.
yeah.
And that's always like the artists. They'll ask me like, "What are the dimensions for this again?" And it's just like an American comic, only bigger. Like, don't sweat. Misimo.
I know, dude. He's an. I mean, I say this every time I turn to the page with another artist. Like, I just I love every single one of these artists in this book, dude. And
Me too.
I'm pretty sure I've talked to almost every single one on the channel. Like,
Yeah,
I'm just a huge fan of all their work. So to
very
get
cool.
one book with everybody, it's
It's
just dope.
it's fucking awesome. Yeah, this is Christian J. Measy, better known as Measy-Mo. Measy-Mo works lightning fast. He does, oh, what's the word for it? I can't believe I can't think of the word.
Caricatures.
Caricature. So like he's like, that's it for him. I would assume was kind of like a boot camp that makes him so fast because he's got to draw quickly. So like he has no fear. Like when he's drawing, it's just he just goes for it. This story was done when we were closing in on the deadline, and of course, the way that we did Ghost Agents throughout the year of 2022 was that we did a Kickstarter, and as soon as it was fulfilling, we were launching the next one. So we needed to be able to be ready to do that. I didn't want to launch a Kickstarter without a finished book because I'm psychotic like that. We needed like 4 pages maybe for one of the issues. And I went to Measy-Mo and I was like, can you do 4 pages in a week and a half or like 2 weeks or something like that, you know, some like Jack Kirby level shit. And he was like, oh, it's tough. And I was like, what do you want to draw? And he was like, I want to draw a woman who's like an Emma Peel type character. I want to draw 2 monsters. I want it to be in the desert, and I want there to be a scientist. And I said, okay. And I'll never forget, I was actually in the tub when he was texting me this, and I was like, okay. And then I wrote this immediately, and he drew it, and I think he had it early. I think he had it done in like a week. I mean, just insane.
I know he's one of the most talented in the group too. I mean, just
crazy. It's
crazy, dude. Like, I mean, I asked him, I was like, hey, like, could you draw like an avatar for me, like with comic knowledge, like of me, you know, that yes. I wanted to use for not for my logo, but just like I wanted to be able to use. And he like sent me something that just blew me away. I'm like, oh yeah, I can't believe this, dude. Like
it's crazy.
I'm like, you just do you, man. I don't care what you do. Like I trust you. You're the artist. I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. So
yeah,
and I think that's when you get the best from the artist is when you
100% agree. And that's a lot of what Ghost Agents is. You know, I just like I let these artists do what they're going to do. Like, it's just, I want them to feel license and agency to do what they're going to do. And the script for this, I mean, this is kind of like the way that a lot of these work is that it's almost like, I almost kind of write these like they're jokes. They're like a sketch almost in a way, because, you know, the setup here is that they're in the same, and I don't remember if I was thinking in this direction or if we just kept going this way, but like, this is the desert where they've been doing this experimental shit that rips into the netherworld, which is why there's monsters there, because in this world, atomic action results in tearing into the fabric of reality. And she gets it, she blows up the monster, and then she's like, I've had worse days. Like, it's usually kind of like a gag. Like, I almost think of these as like, you know, Peanuts or something. Like, it's obviously more panels, but it's like, you know, character, conflict, resolution, quip. Like, that's how I like to write these little ones like this. And here we have something that had occurred to me later, would have been cooler to put at the end of the book, because that means that this little story would have bookended this book. Didn't think about it. And this is basically, I saw flats around, like the coloring flats, like the part of the coloring process where the lines aren't there.
Right.
Sort of a color guide thing that they've been doing since who knows when, decades ago. And I thought that was cool enough looking that I wanted to have a story that was just that, right? Mm-hmm. And I first had to figure out what it was. I went on CKRS and I was like, hey guys, what is that thing where it's the colors without lines as part of the process? And somebody was like, you mean flats? And I was like, yes. So then I went to Chris Anderson and I was like, can we do that story, but just have it flats? And he was like, you want just flats? Like no lines? I was like, yeah. You know, I basically was asking a penciler to remove his pencils from his work. And the original intention was for this to run in Wizard 2. So this ended up being the version, because I wanted it to have value beyond, right? I didn't want anybody to be like, I already have this. Mm-hmm. I always wanted to feel like if somebody buys something with stuff on it that I worked on, I wanted to have that value of like, well, this is an alternate version of that, just so that it always has that value. And this I just love. I really do.
It did really come out cool. Yeah,
it did. And the first page of this was actually a poster that we put out as well that I
Okay.
have in my bedroom actually, and then I have the original art from that right up there.
Oh yeah, I see it. Yeah,
You can
very
see all
dope.
my shit there, and that's very special to me because that was the first Ghost Agents page that was finished. So,
Yeah,
you know,
no,
that will
it's
always mean a lot to me. This is also the story where you can most see the bleed through from the other pages, which is
oh
of
yeah.
course part of newsprint. But
Well,
what I
this is
found,
also like that. It's like black and red, so yeah, you can see it when you flip. When it's laid down, it's not as
exactly.
noticeable though.
Yeah. But I was afraid that there would be people who would be mad about it.
I mean, it's newsprint. Like, deal with
Exactly.
it. I don't know. I mean, like,
Well, I mean, it's sort of one of those things where it's like I love that, and I
yeah,
had to go back through a bunch of old comics and like notice
a
that they're all
lot of
like
them
that.
have
They
that.
all have
Yeah,
that.
most of them. Most of them, if you have the light underneath the newsprint, it's the paper is completely different. You know, like that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like, I mean, dude, I've seen it on non-newsprint. You know, and
Right.
like the before it was like the glossy paper, right? It was like the in between newsprint and glossy, and I could see stuff through. Like I think it was like
Sure.
the early 2000s, maybe before they
Yeah.
did. I mean, I
Yeah.
hate glossy. You know, like for the most part on like the because the glossy that like Marvel uses is so thin, it's like toilet paper almost.
But it is sort of like you look at it like, will people have a problem with this? Will people complain? Like, will people say the music is too loud? I think the music is just as loud as it needs to be, but are people
Mhm.
going to say it's too loud? And you have to think like that when you're trying to sell a bunch of shit, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
But had zero pushback about that, so obviously it's I was just kind of tripping. But you know, I love this book so much, and this of course is Barry Tan.
Yeah. Another awesome
Um,
story.
it is, and you know, with this one, I gave them sort of like an assignment of being, you know, there's not as much. It's funny that you turn the page trying to
Oh,
say that
sorry.
quickly. No, no, you can because it makes sense. It goes
Yeah.
right over what I'm saying. Is that this is sort of more of a boring story in a way. It's sort of just characters standing around talking.
Yeah.
Uh, Outside of this page where Donna socks this guy in the face, and the sort of the inspiration for this. I love the Guy Ritchie Man from Uncle movie. I love that movie so much. It's great. If you like spy fiction, it's like one of the most fun movies ever. But it didn't do well in the theaters, and there'll never be a sequel. So it's sort of like took those characters, changed them up a bit, you know, made them more like I want them to be, and wrote them into Ghost Agents. So that's what these two guys are. This is
A
basically
lot of Kirby energy in that punch too.
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, this is one where I wanted it to be like Donna, you know, winning this fight. I didn't mean for it to be quite this one-sided,
Hmm.
but you know, you have a lot of different parts of fiction where it's like a woman will fight a man and she kicks his ass and stuff, but like then it seems like, you know, that's awesome, whatever, but it's like, could that actually happen? In the case of Donna, she's a big woman. She's 6'6". She's like a really large person. So
Yeah.
she can really manhandle these other guys. And I really wanted that to be, you know, part of the story with this. So that was intended to be the first part of many. I'll go ahead and
Okay.
talk about this. This was going to
Yeah.
be a long running story that I wasn't 100% sure where it was going to go. And after we did the first one, Barry was like, or actually, he maybe told me up front, he was like, this might take me a while to finish these if we do it this way, because it was going to be serialized, which was kind of like against what I sort of talk about Ghost Agents being that everything is self contained. But I was like, well, that's not a problem, you know. And then as he started to get into it, it was like, this could take me months, if not years, to do. It's
Hmm.
like, well, that's not ideal. And what I don't generally like, and what I think most people don't like, is any kind of a serialized comic where the art changes. All of a sudden, a new artist is doing it.
Yeah, I hate
Because
that.
the artist to me is the director, all the actors, the cinematography, special effects. So it effectively just becomes like an all new movie. Or you know, you're watching Three's Company, and then all of a sudden it turns into Buck Rogers. Is like how crazy it feels a lot of the time, where it's just like we're in a whole different place now. This character looks totally different. All of this is drawn different, and it throws me off. And I didn't want to do that. So the conceit that we came up with for this for the next part of this after Barry's part here is to switch gears and show the past as drawn by Chris Anderson and a different character in a different place in a different setting, so that way it doesn't feel quite so jarring, right? So here we shift and we sort of see the origin of the main villain here, Adelaide von Volker. If you've seen the Man from Uncle movie, there's things about this that will be apparent to you.
Yeah, no, I really love this. Oh, I like this too. You like Barry Chan's in it.
Exactly, and that was my
Okay,
big thing. Was it's like
that's
I'm not
it.
going to have Chris draw these three characters that we've met in the previous story. I'm gonna have Barry. I paid Barry $100 or whatever to do these like 3 or 4 panels that we could sort of plug in there. And Chris, of course, is always, never has sort of ego issues. Always is willing to sort of do the best thing for the project. Can't say enough nice things about either one of these guys.
Yeah.
But here we see how, she was this Nazi, this child of the Nazis who went through this excruciating near-death experience and was driven insane by it, and led to the creation of Apocalyptico. And Apocalyptico, it's like Cobra, Hydra, Smersh, Spectre. Like they always are like into taking over the world. I thought it would be interesting to do one where they don't want to take over the world; they want to end it. They just want to kill everyone on Earth. They want to make God pay for being born, and that's their motivation. So that's what Apocalyptico is all about, and we see this here. This was a little bit embarrassing because it was on me primarily. The character that you see in the chokehold there is supposed to be the former sort of, I don't know if boss would be the word, but he was the compatriot of Adelaide here. If you flip back a few pages to Barry's pages, the first part of this.
Is that him?
No, it's a little bit back further. It's the next one back. Oh, well, the next one is this. Okay, yeah. So you see here the guy with the hair in the foreground is the guy who has hair on his head, not the bald guy. That guy is supposed to be the leader, or the guy who's sort of like the station chief that gives these guys their assignments. And the bald guy is he's sort of like Laurence Olivier and Marathon Man, like Nazi war criminal guy that they're going to figure out what happened to this guy. So if you go back to where we were with these pages, that guy, Chris got mixed up and I didn't catch it, but he drew the wrong guy. He drew the totally incorrect guy about to get killed. And it was actually John Perquette who caught that, because he's working on a story with these characters for the next thing that we're doing. And he was like, was this supposed to be like this? And of course it went to press and we didn't catch it. Yeah. It was in the second issue. And I was like, oh, holy shit. No, that's wrong. So I got with Chris and I was like, can you please just like, all you need to do is make this guy bald and that'll be close enough. But that's a little sort of a funny thing that's, and you always would hear about those mistakes like that getting made in comics, like Big Two comics even. And it's like, how the hell do they do that? Like, how do you have Peter Palmer? Like how do you end up with things that are that wrong? And it's just because you're trying to do so much at once that those are things that you just don't notice. But
right.
Yeah, Chris, to his great credit, corrected what I should have caught and should have let him know more about in the first place. This is a fun one. This is intended to be, oh, and one more thing on those pages I want to observe. The guy standing behind there, that's sort of smirking. Yeah, that's an old friend of mine from high school named Brent Emerson. And he actually, he bought the deal with the Kickstarter where he paid a little extra money to have himself drawn into the issue.
That's funny.
Pretty cool. So yeah, this was the second Donna story that Chris did in actual time. Part of what's fun about this is that she has that sort of Eon Flux hairdo that he gave her, and then she sort of like symbolically loses it as she jumps out of the plane here. Mm-hmm. I like that he did that. I didn't want that to become like a trademark of that character. Like it's sort of like, I like for her to sort of like her style to change over time and to suit her choices that she might be making there. So her hair is all akimbo in this. This is another example of one that ends with a quip, where we go through all this stuff and she kills all these guys. This is one of my favorite.
This is dope, yeah.
Very violent, but I think it's worth it. It's excellent stuff. But it all sort of ends with this joke of it's been a long time since I flew a blimp. The prime minister of France is left gagged and tied because she doesn't have time to bother with that right now. She needs to make sure that the blimp doesn't crater into the earth. So, I mean, a lot of these like quote unquote stories are very simple. You know, it's like some are very involved, and then others are like this, where it's just supposed to be like that first like 10 minutes of a Bond movie, you know,
Right,
just
right.
the action, you know, sort of an excuse. John Burkett,
Yes.
hell of a talent, man. And how this happened was, you know, I had every intention of just making this a book about 60s, 70s spy-fi. And that was what the book was going to be. And Burkett actually was also working on that Darkest Image thing. He was doing a Bruce Lee Super Tiger story. You know, of course, the thing that Craig CK and I played with in Image Grand Design. And did an excellent job. I loved his art, and I wanted to work with him. So he was a case where I reached out to him and I said, I've got this book, Ghost Agents, do $100 a page. What would you like to draw? Like, what do you want to do? And he was very specific about what he wanted. He was like, I want it to be far future, space station in the middle of nowhere, ugly characters, real looking, like unattractive characters. He sent me an Instagram group that he's in that's all just pictures of people surreptitiously taken at state fairs. And he was like, I want it to be like this. And what I could have done in that moment was come back and said, okay, can we make that more like 60s and 70s spy fiction? That's what I could have done. But what I instead elected to do was just lean into it and say, okay, so let's make that part of what this book is. And that was a fateful decision because it blew the doors open on what this book can be about, you know? So this story tells you and shows you that Ghost Agents is something that continues to exist far, far into the future, you know, and it becomes like this institution. So this Ghost Reaper character I came up with to sort of, you know, have an extra far out element. But, you know, he just did a tremendous job with this. And this was also something I started the second issue with this story. The story was in the second issue, the first story in the second issue. And part of the reason that I did that was that I could already tell that we were getting that sort of OCD thing from people where they're like, I can't buy the second one if I don't have the first one. I need them all. And it's like, well, with this book, it doesn't really matter. Like you're always going to sort of be thrown into some new situation. So, you know, anybody who bought the second issue expecting more of the same from the first issue was immediately confronted with this, where it's
Right.
like, what the hell are we talking about? All of a sudden it's Star Wars.
Yeah, this was a favorite of mine for sure. I love the design that he did on this character. I
Excellent
mean, the whole
job.
story is really dope. And I too was like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Space? I mean, like I wasn't disappointed, but I was like, oh, what this is wasn't expecting it. And I was pleasantly
Exactly.
surprised, you know, to get that
Right.
story in there.
Well, and that kind of thing I feel is important to do. Like most of my favorite things in life, I didn't quite know what I thought of them the first time I saw them. You know, it's that sort of that challenging aspect of like, what the hell is this? I don't know what I think of it. I got to sit with it for a while. And then it ends up being your new favorite thing. You know, I mean, like it's that you're sort of repulsed and then attracted by so many things. And that's kind of what we were trying to, obviously the art is beautiful.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Burkett also he wasn't coloring his work yet at this
Oh yeah,
point.
it
So
was
some of my local friends,
Sean Coots and Chris Humphreys.
yeah, a couple of my local friends, and people were like, "Who are these guys?" And it's like they're not on Facebook. They're two guys that I see in real life. So here we have a page by Dave Grom. And the idea here, and I wonder how many people have caught on to this because we didn't spell it out, but this is supposed to be Clutch Quartermain, that same character from earlier who jumped into the Netherworld. This is his sort of continuing experiences in the Netherworld.
I did not
Right?
catch on to that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what this is. So
Okay.
there he is. He's floating around and all this weird shit. Indeterminable amount of time has gone by. And the mission statement with these is just I show the artist the character is originally drawn by Adam Lemna, and I say, draw this guy surrounded by weird shit. That's the whole job.
Yeah.
And then it's up to you to come up with what the weird shit is.
We got another John Burkett story.
Yep. And this was the Briquette story that I wanted. Excuse me. Not to say I didn't want the other one, but he drew Bruce Lee so well, and that sort of like kung fu action and all that stuff so well, that I wanted to see him do it again. Right. I wanted to see him do it in a book that I did. So the idea here is Shang-Chi in Marvel was sort of designed to be like the continuing adventures of a character like the Bruce Lee character in Enter the Dragon, right? Like he's this kung fu, like almost like a monk kind of a guy, and he gets recruited by, I think, and that it's MI5, I believe, in Enter the Dragon, to go on this mission that he kind of doesn't want to go on, right? So similar character here, obviously, only it's not MI5, it's Ghost, and he's not quite like, he's even more of like a monk type guy. And if you look at the page previous, like this is clearly very inspired by the last scenes of Enter the Dragon.
I mean, yeah, even those.
Yeah, like the shit has hit the fan. He's got these scars, right, which are evocative, clearly, of things that we maybe are familiar with from pop culture. And this is him going through sort of his own personal debrief from that experience. He's going on a fast, and he is meditating, and this whole story is meant to sort of be a foreshadowing of the last story in the book, is what this is intended to be. You know, and he fights his demon in his subconscious, you know. And
yeah, this one's really dope. It's another, I mean, I love what Briquette did with this story, dude.
Really, yeah, and the colors of this are crazy. And this is after he was able to color his own stuff. He got the ability to do that with his tools and stuff. And
did a great job.
Truly did, man. And this is one of those ones where it's like, I feel like it stands alone. I feel like the other story stands alone, but if you read them both, then you get the context of it. You know, and that's what I really try to do with all of the stories in this book.
And you got Chris Faison.
Yeah, this is another one where Faison is so good, and he was so nice to do that first page with Kennedy and Howard Hughes. That's I asked him what he wanted to do, and my memory is that he wanted to do like something like a romance comic, and he wanted it to involve Elvis. He wanted to feel like an Elvis movie in a way. I always say that Elvis movies are their own genre, in which all of them star Elvis, except for Wild at Heart by David Lynch, which stars Nicolas Cage, but is still in essence a hard R-rated Elvis movie in the way that it's set up and presented. So this is the far future, and this character is Elvis. I actually had intended for him to, and assumed that he was going to use his photorealistic style. So I thought he was going to draw Elvis in this. He obviously didn't quite, but I think you can still get the point that that's who this guy is supposed to be. So
yeah, definitely.
This is the far future, and these characters are supposed to be like sort of a throwback to like 40s gangsters, only in the future. Like that's sort of like the trip they're on. And that's this Agent 68 E68 in reference to the 68 comeback special and the black leather and all that sort of stuff. That's what this character is. You can tell that I'm a fan of Elvis, so it was really fun to write this. So he sort of seduces this woman. This is a lot of people's favorite story, which is interesting to me because it's so much different from everything else in the book. But you know, Faison is very good.
Great. It's another great story. Yeah. I mean,
yeah. Well, these romance comics too, it's like when I was a kid, you know, you couldn't have got me to even touch one of these things. Like it was like I didn't want that in my life. But it's like since then I've gone back and like, you know, they have Ramita art. They have such good work in them, you know, and like Steranko, of course, did a great one. And it's like these romance comics are good. And it's sort of like you see in that the Spider-Man comic became one of those, really, once Ramita took over. There's also a little something I couldn't resist having in here, but on that second page there where your thumb is in the middle panel, he says something about this is for all the people on Delta 8. Which Delta 8 is the drug that we can take and fly over states. It's made out of hemp that'll get you a really serious buzz, as if you're on marijuana. And I couldn't resist that. Like in this context, it's supposed to be like a planet that these mobsters turned out and destroyed. But I couldn't help but do that. I like there where he kicks the robot and yells karate.
Oh yeah, and it breaks the panel boards. Yeah, I like that a lot too.
Yeah. I think that was his idea. Yeah, so much fun. Here's another. This is Dave Pretorius. Another, we're checking in again on Clutch Quartermain here as he floats through the netherworld. Once again, just draw weird shit. And this is the weird shit he felt like drawing.
Yeah, it's really dope.
That's also sort of a litmus test for the way that people work with me or don't. It's like if I ask somebody to just draw weird shit and they're like, what do you mean? That's probably a bad sign that we're going to be able to work well together. And that's actually only happened once. There's actually only one person who would hit me up on Instagram, and I was like, draw this guy in weird shit, I'll give you $100. You know, it was like, you know, the person was like, what do you mean? I was like, draw a giant cricket, draw whatever, draw a volcano, draw your nightmares, draw your dreams, you know. Here we have Danny Nicholas, who is another one that I kind of scouted out. He did a excellent Al Williamson style Ghostbusters newsprint story, and it was like pitch perfect. Like it looked like it could have come out in 1984, 85, 86, whenever that movie came out. And I was like, I need this guy. Like I immediately was like, this dude is we're on the same wavelength. And this was actually originally written to be like that. It was going to be like a Ghost Agents newspaper strip with these two guys. These are the same two guys that turned up in the Donna story earlier, the Napoleon Solo and Kuryakin type dudes. And then what he ended up drawing was not that. And it was like, well, okay, whatever. Still cool. So again, this is another one that's very simple and just kind of ends with a quip. You know, like it's all just sort of an excuse to draw this action. The coloring is Peter Hensel. Peter Hensel, I encourage to get weird, and he got weird.
Yeah.
I love how this stuff just seems like burned into the page. Like his coloring of this, I think, is just really interesting. And takes, I don't want to say conventional art, because I don't think that's really the phrase for it, but very good like workmanship that Danny did here. Because
yes,
it sort of go into that, like that Al Williamson sort of idea of just like, and Al Williamson is one of my favorite artists, so I don't want this to sound like in any way like any kind of a slam, because it's not. But like the way that Williamson's work, it's just such good craftsmanship. You know, like
yeah, agreed.
That dude, like he did comics the way that like a carpenter could make amazing woodwork, you know.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where Danny is with this. So
Yeah, I
putting in
was
like,
looking through that Frazetta book that I was talking about, the Taschen, and there's a lot of comic book pages where Frazetta and Williamson were collaborating.
Yeah.
And just unbelievable, you know?
Yeah. Unreal. I mean, just like it's like the Sistine Chapel, you know.
Yeah.
So then what I wanted to do with this was to make it more like Ghost Agency, was to take those and just make the color weird. Like do some weird shit with the color, do some like really like Vivian Westwood level shit with the color. And I think it worked. You know, I mean, some people might think that that combination is not good, but I love it. I think it's cool.
Yeah, I definitely dig it.
This guy, this is I don't know. I think I could probably be best described as agnostic. I've had a few moments in my life where I felt like maybe there was something up and stars were aligning and I was doing the right thing, and it was the universe or whatever God was telling me to do something. This is very much one of those cases. This artist is a guy named Miguel Galindo. He's in Mexico. I had posted on the group CKRS about a friend of mine in Mexico who lives about a block from a balloon factory where they have old molds from Mark's toys from the 60s. They have the molds that were made for American toys, Marvel Comics characters, Universal monsters, that sort of thing. And they make the toys now. They presently make those toys, you know, highly illegal.
Yeah.
But it's Mexico, so you can get away with a lot. And I posted about them in the group. Want to be careful to protect my friend from like Interpol or whatever. Like there's any number of ways that it could go bad. And I don't want my friend to get in trouble, and I don't want to lose the ability to get these toys anymore, you know. And it's just cool to me that they're still around and that they're popping those things out. So I posted about those. Over the course of a few days, different people sort of chimed in and we're like, oh, that's cool. I'll reach out to the guy, this and that. And I'll actually show you an example of like what these look like. That's of course the Thor one. Grabbing my nose. And this is an older one. They don't come in red anymore, but like dope shit.
Yeah.
But black market toys, sort of dangerous. This guy Miguel, who lives in Mexico, obviously reached out to me, sent me a message on Facebook and said, hey man, tell me more about those toys. Or like, who's your friend? And I was like, this guy could be 5-0.
Yeah.
This dude could be Mexico 5-0. He could also live in Mexico City. And I was like, I could get my friend in trouble. My friend down there that's making help has a line on these bootleg toys. And it was like, shit, I shouldn't say anything. And I let some days go by. And I thought about it more. I was like, that's crazy. Like, what the fuck am I talking? Like, there's no way the cops are like monitoring CKRS looking for tips on bootleg Mexican toys. It's just not other being
Yeah.
paranoid. Too much Delta 8, So I reached out to Miguel and I was like, hey man, about that thing that we were talking about in the group, let me know if you're still interested. And that was like all I said. It was kind of like one of those things. And he replies by sending me examples of his art, which is clearly dope, and was like, oh yeah, I work in a bunch of different mediums. He got mixed up about what I was reaching out to him about. That he was like, do you know somebody that's making comics? I was like, yeah, me. And your art is awesome. Do you want to collaborate? And he was like, yeah, of course. So totally accidentally, this guy fell into my lap. And I almost didn't reach out to him because I thought it was going to be trouble.
Crazy. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, this dude's art is phenomenal.
Right. Like he's like a George Perez, he's like our George Perez. And it's just kind of like, well, how did like that is such an insane situation for that to just fall into my lap right like that. I mean, like unreal. Like, how did that happen? And yeah, this is a guy that you'll see more of his work to come, I'm sure. But
yeah, definitely
he does
awesome.
like political cartoons for a newspaper in Mexico. Like
Crazy.
his day-to-day work is very different from this. And this
Yeah.
is maybe more what his heart, well, I don't know for sure, but like, he clearly loves doing this. But yeah, I gave him a nice violent one, and he kind of drew Donna like it kind of reminds me of those Mexican Spider-Man comics where Gwen Stacy never died.
Yeah.
That's kind of
I
the
know you're
vibe.
talking. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, this is a great story, dude. Great. I
Yeah.
mean, the art is amazing too,
Yeah. And he does like Blue Demon comics, the wrestler, the Blue Demon, the guy who's like Santo's partner. Just awesome, awesome shit. So here's the bang that we end the book with, the main book with. Misimo, of course. And here we check back in with Lee and Ben Venice with his beard. We saw Ben earlier. The funny thing about this too is that this character was originally supposed to be that same woman from the Desert Story that he drew in a week.
Oh, okay.
He forgot what she looked like, and he just drew this woman instead. So she became a new character, Anna Venture, which is kind of like Emma Peel, whatever. But yeah, this is the big bang. This is where we go and sort of come up with a resolution for this problem we've got in the desert with the netherworld demons and all that sort of stuff. So Lee is initially doesn't want to do it because he's not about it, and it's like, well, this time you're not going to have to kill any humans. You'll just have to kill these monsters. And he's thinking back to when he had that, that hallucination, and figures that it's something he's supposed to do. Just wild stuff. This is originally a different artist had this, and it was going to be in the first issue, and that guy couldn't make it happen. So I changed a couple details to make it more in line with what the rest of the plot was like, and brought in this mech at the end, which is pretty wild. Sort of like a Transor Z early version of those mech stories from Japan.
This is another one. I mean, I love anytime I see his art, but I mean, there's the coloring and everything on this paper. Just it's insane. This is Rick, and then we got Rick Lopez.
Yeah, and this is again
another
page of Clutch Quartermain encountering weird shit in the other world. This is a biblical angel, in the Bible, like the way they describe angels is like this. not like a, some woman with big wings that's beautiful and has a gown. Rick actually has said to me that this print is his best-selling print. When he goes in tables, people that don't know anything about ghost agents love this. So that's
Yeah,
proof parcel that each piece of this book to me is worth a lot.
agreed.
And then Tony Farrow, who I don't even know if he knows he's in this book because we got him last. This is a piece that's only in this. Farrow, my memory of this was that he drew this like Kirby tech. And then I said, if you draw this guy and pop him in there, I'll give you $100 for it. And he was like, all right. And that was how that went down. So, another one of those. So, um, but he did excellent work with that too. I mean, the whole thing is just the idea of it is just that we can do so many different things with this. I mean,
Yeah,
like
no, definitely.
it's
I mean,
especially as this book sort of establishes, like we can go anywhere. We can go anywhere in time. We can do, all sorts of stuff. And in my head, I always kind of know what the whole plot is, the whole universe is. But my ideal with this is that I feel like even people that don't feel like they like comics could probably still love this and find this art interesting and want to get it and get into it.
agreed.
That's what I'm trying to do on the local level, especially. I hired a press agent and everything, and I'm going on local news. Local guy who makes a comic book with a bunch of people from all over the world. I think it's a good hook.
Hmm.
So it's been fun. It's been fun and interesting.
Yeah, and you got all the contacts for all the artists that are in the book too, so you can follow all of them.
Yeah, that was very important to me.
And then before we wrap this up, we got one more story in the back.
Story is one way to put it. Ken Landgraf. Ken Landgraf.
Yeah.
It's currently in my life. I've lived in Louisville my whole life, and I lived just a few miles away from the gas station where I bought my first spinner rack comic. I had other comics, but this is the first one I picked off a spinner rack and bought. It was a Wolverine two-parter that had or a big Wolverine book that had the Hulk two parts introducing Wolverine and an essay, and then it had a story where Wolverine fights Hercules in a bar over a woman. I'm reading this at 8 years old, which I love. And it was drawn by Landgraf and then inked by George Perez and written by Joe Duffy. It was one of the first comic stories I ever read. So then for him to now be in this, especially with everything that he represents and everything that he's all about, insane.
Yeah,
Insane.
just crazy.
Yeah. And with this, he kind of wanted us to give him a script. And I didn't want to do that because I just wanted unadulterated Ken Landgraf. I didn't want to guide him too much. So I showed him pictures of Donna. He of course drew her with much bigger boobs than I would let anybody else get away with drawing.
Yeah.
And our kung fu character versus monsters from the netherworld. And it was just like, do crazy shit, do your nightmares. That's always kind of the thing. I always think about, I think maybe I've said this before, it's worth repeating though, was that I saw an interview years ago with Captain Beefheart, who I don't think played any instruments, but the guys in his band obviously did. And he would do things like go to the guitarist and be like, play like you just heard your mother died, play like glass breaking, and do this kind of like, like try to connect with it in ways that had more to do with moods and feelings to lean into what the art would be like. And I kind of try to do that.
Yeah, I think it's awesome. Missimo colored it. I
Yes.
mean, just 4 pages of just really, really dope art. I mean, it's
Yeah.
such a great way to kind of cap this book off. And obviously you got some Barry Tan.
Yeah. I have something to show you where this is concerned too. This is mind-blowing to me. So get a load of this. This was made for me by a guy named Dean Akins, who I've known for some 20-something years. And he was so taken with ghost agents that he actually made this. This May
That's dope.
Zero base is the logo was created by Sam J. Royale.
Mm-hmm.
As is the last or the back page of the book. And it actually, not only does it just look incredible, but it also lights up.
Oh,
I mean,
wow.
like, what the hell?
That's fucking awesome, dude. Yeah.
How is this my life? That this
Yeah.
is what happens. I'll never quit being blown away by the whole situation. So very, very fond of this. The back page of the book there is Sam J. Royale. My memory is that he did this just on his own. I don't know what he originally did this for.
Yeah.
It may have been the back. Actually, it may have been the back cover of the second issue. So then we added the Apocalyptico thing, because this is Ghost Agents Apocalyptico.
Right.
We no longer do issue numbers. We don't want to do it that way anymore. But he did excellent work with this, and this in turn inspired other people to start to come up with different ideas for other Donna imagery and stories. So
Yeah.
the whole thing
So
with this sort of thing is that you don't, like, so many people that I know that write comics are really, and this is just like on the interpersonal level. I'm not talking about, like, Alan Moore. They think of art as something they hire. Like, that their ideas are so great that they can write this amazing script and it doesn't really matter. The artist is just there to work for them and do the job for them. And I don't see it that way at all. Like, I generally don't believe in, like, I had a debate with somebody a while back who said that any comic book writer, anybody who calls himself a comic book writer, should be doing storyboards that the artists then just copy. They use that to do their work. And that's not, I mean, I can do that. I can draw well enough that I could do that, but I generally just don't want to. Every so often there'll be something where I'll do that, but generally, no, I don't ever want to do that. I'm more interested in sort of sparking something in the artist. The best thing about all this, which is full of good things for me and a lot of great feelings and a lot of things that I'll treasure for the rest of my life. But the very best thing is when artists tell me that they like working with me, and they tell other people that they've enjoyed doing the
I've
work.
only heard good things. Yeah.
That's everything to me. I get them paid a little bit of money. A lot of the people don't have the gift of gab, which I do. And, like, being able to get those people paid and get their work seen. I know I say this a lot, but it's everything. It's such a big deal to be able to pull that off.
Yeah, no, definitely. And like I said, like I love the book, and it's been super fun going through it with you. And I can't wait to see what other Ghost Agent stuff comes out. I know that you have stuff that you're working on right now.
Yeah.
And for everybody listening and watching, this book was not just a Kickstarter. There is a print run. So you can go to Cosmic Lion Productions, you can pick up a book from there. I know Rocko shares on social media where you can pick it up if you're local to where he lives. I
Yeah.
know the shop I'm at in Winnetka, California, San Fernando Valley in LA, we have copies at the shop. So it's available. So go pick it up. It'll be one of your favorite comics easily. It's definitely one of my picks. It'll be for 2023 because that's when I think people really started being able to get it. So I didn't put it
Yes,
in
100%.
2022. So it's already one of my picks for 2023 of one of my favorite books. So go pick it up. Go follow Rocko, follow Cosmic Line. I'm going to have all those links down below. And
all the money that we make from this goes into the next book, because the next book that we're doing will be big. A lot of pages, means a lot of artists that I need to pay. And that means that the Kickstarter goal will be much higher than anything we've done before. So any money that we can make off of Ghost Agents, of course, offsets that. And we'll make that more feasible and possible for us to do, because it's not a small amount of money. It's a lot.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. But yeah, go support the book. Go support everything Cosmic Line's doing, Rocko, all that good stuff. And Rocko, as always, it was a pleasure. And we'll do this again next time that big book you are talking about is out. We'll do another flip through.
So cool. I'm very excited.